Hi, I'm Benga Onoto. I like discussing about international law, international politics, and international relations. And today I'd like to discuss about India on the moon. India is on the moon. Congratulations to that incredible country. Is Nigeria next? Who is next? Who is going to surprise the world in being totally precocious in high tech and turning around its fortunes from a developing state, possibly to a developed state? Remember, India was known for the Burning Man film, the Burning Train film, I should say, in the days of Dharmendra and Jitendra. The only things we seem to have known India for would be things like film production, Bollywood. But now we have India turning up in space. So from Burning Train to the moon, what are the features of the Indian moon mission? What shoulders of giants did India and its program stand on? What does this all mean for developing countries? What does this mean for Nigeria in particular, which has a very ambitious space program? And what are the practical benefits of space technology for a developing nation? What are the debates that developing states like Nigeria, like Ghana, Uganda, Zimbabwe, I just landed, and also has a space mission. I'll come to the identifying those states that have space missions in Africa and in the developing world. Yeah, but very exciting things are happening all around the world. And so what's the benefit for these states when they go that direction? Let's start with India. Congratulations, India. As I said, India has done this. India has launched the Chandrayaan 3. I hope I got that right, Chandrayaan. Yeah, this makes it the newest state to land on the moon and is the first space mission to land on a particular part of the moon. That part of the moon is known as the south pole of the moon. The advantage of landing on the south pole of the moon is one which goes beyond what's useful to India alone. It's useful for the entire world. India is now the latest entrance into high space tech, and we know for sure that its president, its people are proud. The presidents are now the prime minister. I should remember to call him correctly. Narendra Modi stated India is now on the moon. Only 4 countries have managed to land successfully on the moon. Only 4 countries, the US, the former USSR, China, and now India. India, however, is the first state to land, as I said, on the South Pole. The moon South Pole, even according to NASA's estimation, is a mystery, it's science, and intrigue all wrapped together. The reason why it's useful to land on the moon's south pole include the fact that it has particularly deep craters that need to be investigated because they've been shielded for literally forever from light. They don't face sunlight, so therefore they are extremely cold. I think the estimation I had about how cold it could be is minus 248 centigrades, which is nearly double the coldest part of the Earth. I think the coldest part of Earth is Antarctica, with just 144 Fahrenheit. So I mean, it's extremely cold there, and the importance of that coldness, and the reason why the Indian mission aimed for that part of the moon includes the fact that it's able to open up its that starts from, I think, from tomorrow, within 24 hours of they need 15 hours before they can launch what is called the 6-wheeled lander, the lander vehicle, which has landed on the moon, will open up, and a 6-wheeled rover will drive out and then go on a mission across the moon, roaming across the lunar surface, entering the craters, taking measurements, doing other wonderful things like gathering images and data, everything that would be useful, not only to the Indians, but also to those states that it cooperates quite closely with in space, which of course includes the states that have signed up to the so-called Artemis Accord. That's the US and some of the Western states. So there are dichotomies in space cooperation. Although the entire world seems to get along well in space and unlikely friends are made, the US and the USSR and even Russia have been cooperating in space. But in recent times, we see that they diverge into two. Some are going with the Western powers, some are going with China, Russia, and there are countries like Nigeria who just make friends with everyone and go with all of them. So the space mission of India, along with the Western partners, not that they did this, they didn't do this. This is purely India's achievement, but they belong to the same camp in space cooperation. What they intend to do is, if these images are gathered, if they're able to prove that there's water in sufficient frozen quantities on the moon, then that's good for interplanetary space travel, because then missions can land on the moon and take off from the moon after collecting more energy, collecting water. And water is something that human beings need wherever they are, whether they're on space or whether they're on Earth. They would need water. And if water is available and can be proven to be in sufficient quantities, as we suspect they are in the south part of the moon, then that's it. India will be the first ones to break the news, and this has all kinds of implications for space travel, space colonies, as the case may be in the future. So that's one of the important news we will be watching out for, and maybe we'll do another program on that in the next few weeks. But as I said, India is standing on the shoulder of giants. India is doing this for all of us. We congratulate India, we congratulate ourselves. Space is a place for all mankind. That's why we have this wonderful legal concept known as the common heritage of mankind. Space, outer space, in its endless quantities and in its endlessness, is the common heritage of mankind. It belongs not to just to this generation of mankind, but to all future generations of mankind to come. Now, as I said, why is this important for all of us, aside from the fact that we'll find water? Well, space has always been a way of understanding how we all got here. Space has been a way of discovering how the Earth itself was formed, and therefore we get the history of the Earth, we get the future of the Earth, all wrapped up under our understanding. We are human beings, we are ambitious, we want to know how we got here, and we are doing quite well at that, actually, because starting from the initial space moon landings, the lunar landings done by the US, we were able to discover that impacts, celestial impacts, are quite frequent in outer space. We have moon rocks crashing into the Earth. Yes, that's happened. We also have Earth being part of what formed the moon itself. And then we have other impacts striking, asteroids striking the moon. That's why it has all kinds of craters on it, and the endless past of its history as well. So we discover so many things when we land on planetary surfaces, and this is what makes it usually worth it. This is what makes scientists very, very excited every time they hear that a space mission is taking place. It helps us to put ourselves in context of the universe. Then it helps us in so many other ways. Going to space has made us discover new things about how to live on Earth. For instance, it is through going to space that we discovered that we could make new, we discovered new technology, such as even vacuum cleaner. The vacuum cleaner came from space NASA research, suspended, having houses that are standing on pumped, what I would refer to as gears, and houses and buildings suspended in tensions. These are so many ways in which space has helped us. I'll talk about space minerals. We are discovering that we have so many minerals in outer space, starting from californium. Californium is something everyone gets excited about because it's very rare, very expensive to find. We discovered things like highway radial tires, chemical detection mechanisms, landmine removal mechanisms. We've discovered artificial limbs from space visits and space technology and space inventions. So many space experiments have been conducted on the International Space Station, and it's an ongoing affair. It's been there continuously now for over 20 years. States continue in their, shuffling of their astronauts there, and continuous experiments take place. Softwares have been discovered, food safety measures have been discovered through practice, and we even have food printing. The idea that we're able to print food is something that is completely, I would have loved to say groundbreaking, but in this case, it will be space breaking. So space is useful. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's look at why African countries are thinking of space. And there are so many reasons why they should. Let's start with those countries that are looking at space. We have Egypt. In fact, I think in ranking order, we have the South Africans, we have Nigeria. Nigeria seems to come next in terms of actual readiness for space in its investments, in number of satellites, in dedicated space in national organizations, dedicated space laws. Okay, we have South Africa, we have Nigeria, we have Egypt, we have Algeria, we have Morocco, we have Ethiopia. I think the South Africans have 11 satellites. Next to the South Africans in terms of satellite launches would come the Egyptians. They've launched up to 10. I think Nigeria and Algeria share 6 satellites each that they've launched in their own individual capacities as separate countries. Then there's Morocco with three satellites. We have Ethiopia with 2 satellites, and we have some other states like Ghana, like Mauritius, like Kenya, like Rwanda, who have launched between 1 and 2 satellites. Interesting developments. Africa is in space, and it's a good thing. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to make this video, because when things like this happen, there is a sense in which Africans tune off and think this is something that should only happen to other countries. If it's happening to India, it should happen to us. Progress and scientific developments are, in a sense, for everyone. Science and technology is very much democratized. You don't need to wait hundreds of years. You don't need to wait even decades. You can leapfrog progress once you understand the techniques, and these things are the very basics of human intelligence. If we apply ourselves at it, and we are, as I said, doing that, I'm quite happy with the progress that we are making, although there's much more opportunity for more serious effort on our side. So let's look at the Nigeria space program. Nigeria has been in space. Nigeria has been interested in space dating back to the 1960s. This is one of the things people forget about countries like Nigeria, African countries. They can be just as interested in progress as any other country in the world. as any other people. Only problem is they face very difficult circumstances in the world order. They are experiencing what I would call a terrible exploitation, a terrible network of exploitation in the international order, which makes it very difficult for them to scale up and do some of the things that they want to do in good time. But yeah, as I said, Nigeria has been interested in all this since the 1960s, but in reality, it was in 1986 that Nigeria announced its first space-based telecommunication launch ambition. By the early months of the 2000s, when President Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria, he started the investment that was needed in space. And very soon, I think it was 1999, Nigeria instituted and implemented the creation of the so-called National Space Research and Development Agency, NASRIDA. NASRIDA was launched with fanfare in 1999, and I can report that it's been doing tremendously well. I personally have visited the premises of NASRIDA, and I was quite surprised to see images captured by NASRIDA's the Nigerian satellites, indigenously owned satellites, capturing the territory of the US, capturing the territory of the aerial shots of the UK, different countries. Because you have the satellite there, you can take any pictures you want. So we don't get to be the subject of other people's photography interests. We also, as Africans, as Nigeria, are able, and we have photos of territories of any country we have wants, including the developed ones. That gave me a lot of pride in the country. It gave me a lot of pride also in the African states. So Nigeria has its own national space research and development agency. It also has about 6 centers. It has a center for basic space science. It has a center for national remote sensing. It has a center for geodesy and geodynamics. It has a center in different parts of Nigeria, different centers that do a lot of wonderful research. There's a center for atmospheric research. There's a center for propulsion, transport and propulsion, spread around the country. Very, very good news to report on that front. The reason why Nigeria is interested in this and has a space policy is simply based on what it has said in its Nigeria space policy, which I'm sure anyone can Google up and find the wonderful pages of the National Space Agency of Nigeria. You would find that Nigeria has stated that the reason why it's doing all this is because it does believe that no country in the 21st century is able to advance without a good show, a good grasp of space technology. You are not in a position to grab and grasp in your hands the development in modern times if you are not in a position to contribute to a developed space program. This is why Nigeria is doing this, and it has been vigorously pursuing the attainment of space capacities and capabilities as an essential tool for its socio-economic development. Although a lot of people will hear this and say, this is not what a developing country should be doing. This is not what a country that has not fed all its people. This is not what a country that has not even provided energy, electricity, 24 hours electricity for itself should be doing. I disagree entirely. I think this is the more reason why those countries should be doing this. This is the more reason why Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, the developing countries should go into space technology, because space technology allows you to leapfrog progress. You can simply start punching above your weight once you get your space tech right. For instance, if you have your space tech right, then you have your satellites that can look into the future for you and warn you about the things that are coming along. Take, for example, the Nigerian satellites. What are they doing? Well, Nigeria has 6 sets of satellites in space. 6 satellites derived, paid for, run, and doing all kinds of wonderful things for Nigeria. 1 or 2 of them are no longer in service because they've gone out of service. 1 was destroyed. I may be able to identify shortly the specific order in which the satellites were introduced. But what you need to know is that if you have satellites, the kind of satellites Nigeria has, then you are able to find out very quickly what's coming your way in terms of disaster. The first Nigerian satellite is known as Nigeria Sat-1. It was a disaster monitoring constellation satellite. It helped Nigeria to monitor pollution, land use, all kinds of phenomena, including flooding. I have seen adverts in the Nigerian newspapers telling the people of Kubwa in Abuja that flooding was coming their way. This comes from satellite imagery, comes from satellites, remote sensing, and all kinds of. So satellites and satellite technology and space technology solve problems that are bread and butter issues of developing countries. If you want more progress, if you want more success in your financial and economic circumstances as a country, you really should be interested in satellite technology. This is one of the reasons why I am personally fully behind Nigeria in doing what it is doing. And it's very ambitious. Nigeria has, for instance, decided that it's going to launch its own indigenous rocket and its own indigenous space astronauts by 2030. This was an announcement made in 2015. As of 2015, when that announcement was made, it was really doable. I saw it as possible, and I am still very confident that if the current government, for instance, the new government, shows more interest and more willpower to fund the National Space Agency and its centers, I don't see any reason why this plan of launching an indigenous satellite and an indigenous set of astronauts will not be possible. So Nigeria has decided that it's going to have its own astronauts. That's what I call them, Nigerian astronauts. In Nigerian astronauts, 3 of them at first I had when it was announced, who will be trained abroad, but will eventually be moving on a Nigerian rocket and going into space in their own right. Much along, that would even be a bit of a better and more impressive achievement than what we are saying India do here, because India is using an unmanned mission. If we in Nigeria, if an African country is able to move into space in a manned mission, that would really be something that would announce Africa as now coming of age. And that is something that will be good for the country, because it would spill out a bountiful set of opportunities, interest in space from Nigerian and African students and scholars, and science and technology will be something that is easier attained and will have benefits that are too much to even imagine presently. But rather than find this kind of reasoning, what I find very irritating is that a lot of Nigerians tend to be very self-defeatist in this area. They would be the first ones to say, no, this should not be done. There's no need for Nigeria to do this. Nigeria should not be involved in space. As I said earlier, that's lazy thinking. That's not imaginative at all. What Nigeria should be doing is exactly what it's been doing. Nigeria plans to train astronauts and send them into orbit. And Nigeria plans to continue to make new satellite launches. There are practical benefits for this. Communication satellites are useful for providing education. Communication satellites are useful for providing medical treatment. We're having a situation where we can now conduct operations. Telemedicine is possible. People can literally perform operations using instruments from New York. You can perform an operation in Ogbomoso in Nigeria, or in Darazo in Bauchi State, or Ikotepene, wherever it is that an urgent operation needs to be done. With telemedicine, we can get this done. The internet is there, the utensils are there, wonderful things can be done. Technical operations can be achieved in telemedicine. We can have better town planning. We can have marine and coastal monitoring. I'm quite happy to note that the new government has developed what is called a blue and marine economy ministry. This is a kind of ministry that will benefit from space technology. You can monitor the entire Gulf of Guinea from specialized remote sensing and reconnaissance satellites. So the piracy we are experiencing right from our internal waters can be dispelled of with appropriate investment in space. Again, border control. This is one of the things that excites Africans and African governments, keeping themselves in their borders, and you get more better border controls by having reconnaissance and all kinds of satellites that can monitor specific places. We also have the need to continue updating our geo navigation systems, the global navigation system. We need to continue using it for policing. Sambisa Forest is one of the Achilles heels of Nigeria. Sambisa Forest alone is enough justification for our investment in space, because if we are able to marshal that forest, if we're able to find out exactly where all these ragged and ragtag terrorists are hiding in that forest, we will get the problem solved. So satellites are able to help us in so many ways. And this is why I welcome what's going on in the world with developing states moving into space. There is a lot to be done in space that needs the contribution of developing states. We need developing states like China, we need developing states like India, we need the African investors in space, Nigeria, to contribute to debates like, where does the airspace end and where does outer space begin? This is a debate that's been going on for decades, and the developed countries do not want a solution there because they imagine the world, that they imagine a future where they would be the only ones going into space. Now that we know we're all going into space and the traffic will increase, the time to decide where exactly airspace ends and outer space begins, which is a legal problem as much as it's a security problem, the better for all of us. So the involvement of developing, when we show up at the table of science, we also show up at the table of policy and legal decisions. That's one of the reasons why I celebrate India's success. That's one of the reasons why I think it's good for Africa to invest in space. We also have other things to discuss in space, such as space weaponization and militarization. Should we continue to go down the route of using outer space for destruction, for things like the terrible ideas that people like the former president of the US, Ronald Reagan, had, where he was thinking of strategic, the so-called son of Star Wars. George Bush the third or the second, we nearly had a George Bush the third as well, in any case. So I permit myself that slip of the tongue. We had George Bush father, we had George Bush son. George Bush son was thinking of resurrecting. Thank God he didn't get around to it. He didn't have enough time. He had other crimes to commit around the world, like what he did with Iraq and Afghanistan. He was thinking of resurrecting the idea that was developed by the older, now late Ronald Reagan, where they thought they would be the only ones that can have satellites that can fire from space and hit objects on Earth. Thank God all that is not working. And this is one of the beauties of space technology. This is one of the reasons why I think we all should go into it. It democratizes the future. It makes it possible for us to have a say in how exactly our universe will work. And it's not something that is only developed countries that can get their heads around. It's just physics. It's the physical world, it's the geophysical world. Nowadays, technology is very much democratized. We can all do it. We are doing it with drones. We are doing it with the internet. We all are equal in the possibilities of how to exploit space. On the whole, again, I thank India for what it has done. It's done it for all of us. And I look forward to the next country that moves into space. Thanks for listening.